Good morning and good morning and good evening, people who have joined from Palo Alto or America. So before we start, let me also quickly introduce the speakers and myself. So my name is Mukund. I'm part of VMware IT and working in IT from almost like 9 years, close to 9 years. Before that, I was working with various other companies and having total around 24 years of experience. Currently managing 24/7 mission critical financial and corporate applications in VMware IT, right? That includes the most famous MyVMware and backend systems like SAP and other systems, right? Okay, so with this quick introduction about myself, let me hand it over to Lalit. Lalit, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Mukund. Good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Lalit Parashari. I have completed 9 years in VMware, and before VMware, I was in Tesco and Sonata Software. Here in VMware, I'm managing IT disaster recovery program for our internal VMware. And it is really a great honor for me today to join all of you and share about our journey towards hybrid cloud. Thank you. Over to you, Preeti.
Hey, thank you, Lalit. Hi, everybody, and thank you for viewing this session. My name is Preeti, and I am Associate Manager of Solution Services team at VMware India. Through my role, I've worked on projects such as NSXT deployment and implementation across IT, NSX Advanced Load Balancer global rollout, and also workload migration to public clouds such as VMware Cloud on AWS. I'm very excited to meet you all through this session, and we have some interesting information planned out for you, and I hope you enjoy the session.
Okay, thanks Lalit and Preeti, right, for the introduction. So this is the quick agenda. We will look at the internal IT's, you can say it's the scale of operation, and then we'll look at VMware Cloud on AWS overview, right? And later on we'll see how business drives, what are the business drivers for the migration to the cloud? And later on, we'll also look at, you can say, migration process and core services that we have moved right to the VMC at AWS. And the last 2 points are very critical, right? I request all of you to stay tuned till the last. This is like, what are the recommendations from our side and what are the benefits? These are the two takeaways, key takeaways that you will take at the end of this session. And of course, we will have a Q&A at the end wherein you can post your questions, as Ishita mentioned. We'll answer those at the end of this presentation. Okay. So in terms of scale of operation, these are the very high numbers. Typically, these numbers may be little known for, you can say, normal IT shops in other companies, but for a tech company, this is like normal, right? Take example of Google or any other companies. These numbers will be similar to what those people also have, right? In terms of number of offices, we have 125 offices. We have around 8 data centers, close to 11K AXXI hosts, which is used by R&D as well as IT. I will come to a point that is the number 21, that is the production applications on VMC at AWS. Right? So this is the key point that we are going to discuss today. That is how we migrated these applications and using this platform, that is the VMC Cloud, VMC at AWS, to, you can say, have the DR as well. In these 21 applications, this is like small applications, medium-sized applications, and the large-scale applications like SAP and other big applications. Right? So we will give you an overview of how we achieve this in terms of, you can say, scale as well as economy. Right? And when it comes to storage, we have almost like 19 petabyte of vSAN storage, which is used across all R&D as well as IT applications, right? So all numbers, other numbers are like, very big numbers. I don't want to go into details of each number, but the main point that we want to discuss today's presentation is the 20 odd applications which we have migrated to VMC at AWS. Okay, go ahead, Preeti. So with this, let me hand over to the panel members who can go and take
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mukund. So before we go ahead, let me give you a quick overview about VMware Cloud on AWS. So VMware Cloud on AWS is a service which is being sold and supported by VMware. All the VMware SDDC is running on the AWS infrastructure, and we are taking all infra of AWS itself to run our SDDC. And if you see, we have all the components of SDDC here, which is VMware vSphere. It's having the similar interface as on our on-prem. Also, we have VMware vSAN, which is used for the storage layer, and VMware NSX is going to help us for network security as well as the network virtualization. So all those things are there on the VMware Cloud on AWS. There is a new feature came in as part of the VMware 6.5 that is called hybrid link mode. By which it is easier for us to connect from the on-prem SDDC to the VMC SDDC. That is VMC, when I'm talking, it's nothing but VMware Cloud on AWS. So this is easier to connect from here. And also the on-prem environment, nowadays it's coming pre-configured with the all zone SSO domain with the VMC, so that you can, whenever you are logging into your on-prem SDDC or vSphere, you will be seeing VMC as another data center in your environment. So it is very easier nowadays to manage directly from your any of the vCenter. And when we look on, even if you can see whatever the AWS native services, those can also be easily taken. I mean, we can easily connect with those over the VMC. So those are also one of the big point of running the workload on this VMware Cloud on AWS. Going forward, in the next slide, I'm going to show you how whatever the drivers we are moving towards the hybrid cloud. Preeti, can we go next? Okay, why hybrid cloud? When the question comes to our mind, we think, okay, what is the reason? What is the reason we should go ahead for the hybrid cloud? Okay, so nowadays we have seen there are many applications which is running on our environments. There are so many legacy applications as well nowadays. The modern application is also coming, correct? So the modern application has to have open APIs so that they can connect their APIs to vendor APIs, and so that the business can fulfill their customers' demand, and they can service better. So to manage both the application, we should have some hybrid cloud model in place where we can run few of them on-prem and few of them on cloud, so that it is easier for us to manage both the type of workloads. So I will show you in the next slide for the drivers. What are the drivers behind running the hybrid cloud? Yes. Okay, the first of the driver which is for us to move towards the hybrid cloud is agility. It is very easy for us to quickly provision the new environment into the VMC. And nowadays the demand is so increasing. Every day there is a new change coming in. And new application in coming in. We have to fulfill our business requirement, also the customer requirement. So we have to be very agile in terms of provisioning our environment. The next is scalability, nothing but is elasticity. So we have seen there are so many seasoned workloads, correct? For that, we don't need the all those you can say the storage and CPU, everything on every time of the year. We need only some time of the year. So those type of environments or both those type of workload is also good to run over hybrid cloud. The next is resiliency. So resiliency is also one of the feature or even the driver for us to move towards the hybrid cloud. It is easier for us now to create a DR site over the VMC. And also during any hardware failure in the VMC, it can easily migrate, the workload can easily migrate to another site which is up. So this is also one of the good driver for us. The next, when we come to the next, it is a flexibility. When we run our workload on the on-prem, we don't have the flexibility to move our workload from one data center to another. It is very difficult to switch our data center. But while we running our workloads on the cloud, it is very easier for us to migrate from one cloud to another. And there is no vendor lock-in as such in the VMC, where you can't move your environment or workloads from VMC cloud to another cloud. So it is also the flexibility here in the hybrid cloud environment. The last but not the least is the cost saving. We have seen whenever we are going to set up our new environment in the VMC, we don't need a upfront cost to set up that, correct? We don't have to buy any of the infrastructure. We have to just directly go ahead and put our workloads over the VMC, and we are going to pay whatever we are going to use. So those are the drivers. And that's the reason the cost saving, it's a very good example for the DR, because DR is, we don't require the DR to be up every time on the year. We just need you either during the testing or any disaster scenario. So that is also one of the good good driver which we have been going through the hybrid cloud infrastructure. Can we go next? Yeah. Okay, when we have gone through the drivers, now what type of application selection and how we selected those applications, I'm going to show that in the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned to you that elasticity is the one driver for the hybrid cloud migration, correct? So we have one of our critical application, that is VMware. This application supports the customers during our annual event of VMware. When we have the VMware, all the customer login, all the registration, everything handled by this application. So this is very critical, and this has been used only some part of the year, like it's not been used whole year. So this is a very good candidate to have running on the cloud, where we can increase the memory, CPU whenever on demand, whenever, and those things can be done very quickly and very easily. The next thing which come as our application selection is DevOps tool, disaster recovery. So the DevOps tool, so when I told you last time, like disaster recovery is the one thing which we can have running on the cloud, because we don't have to keep this up every time, correct? We don't need any CapEx. So this is one of the tool which we thought, okay, we should use it into the VMC. The next is SAP HANA. SAP HANA migration we did as part of this. We have used this SAP HANA as extended data center in VMC. Now we have the choice to run this database either in the VMC or on-prem. On top of that, we have the storage layer, storage segmented on the VMC. So we have very good data security. That's another reason we have migrated HANA on the VMC. Can we go next? Okay, I have told you the selection process, what came into picture when we selected those applications. Now, before we are going to migrate our application, either DR site on VMC or migrating the application itself on VMC, there are so many dependencies, and the application is talking to so many other applications. So those dependency check is the prerequisite. And we have our configuration management database, where we have all those applications, dependencies, and all those IP addresses, everything, whatever the infrastructure dependency, service level dependency, and infrastructure, everything is there in the CMDB. And by using our vRealize network insight, we run those reports and we get to know what are the inbound and outbound traffic is there for that application. So accordingly, we go on the VMC and open those firewall ports on the VMC. So those are the application dependency and endpoint check we have to do. This is a prerequisite for us to go ahead on the VMC. In the next slide, so this is our scale. Currently, we have around 20 plus application DR site which is running on VMC. We are able to fail over those applications within 15 minutes, and that as RTO is really very less, and even RPO is also almost negligible, because we will be having no data loss while we are transferring our workload from our on-prem data center to VMC. And the flavors of database and application also, which I want to highlight here, it is we are running Oracle RAC, SAP HANA, MongoDB, SQL, SQL Server. So you name it, we have it. So all the database flavors, whatever we have in market, everything we can run in the VMC without any issues. Even the application wise, SAP CRM, which is running, we have Oracle Access Manager, Kubernetes application is also the new modern applications, which all are running very successfully on our VMware cloud. So those are I had just gone through all those, whatever the drivers for VMC, what are the application selection, how we go ahead in the VMC. And I hope Preeti will take you through on all nitty gritty and the technical side of it, how we have tried to manage this. I think I'll give it to Preeti now.
Thank you, Lalit, for that explanation. So now that Lalit has taken us through the baseline selection criteria of this whole process, I would like to take you through the migration process as such. So we will look at stuff like how we plan for this migration and what are the factors we considered and what are the recommendations or the factors that you should be considering before performing a migration of this scale. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we're going to look at is the planning. In VMware IT, we believe in having a solid plan step by step and having it ready so that we can follow it to make a successful activity. So this is a brief of the plan that we had for the VMware Cloud on AWS migration, and I'm going to walk you through step by step of each of the verticals. So the first vertical is network topology. As we all know, network is the glue that holds the entire topology together. So it's essential to plan for the network before starting a migration of this sort. The first thing that we need to plan for network topology is the capacity planning. Now, what I mean by capacity planning over here is that you need to initially make sure how much workload is going to be hosted in this particular SDDC that I'm going to be creating in VMware Cloud on AWS. And why you need to know that beforehand is that's when you can allocate a suitable IP space for that SDDC. How we do IP space allocation over here is that we have a big chunk of network, like a /16 maybe, which is allocated for a particular region. And out of that /16, we carve out a portion of that network, say a /20, for example, and provide it to the SDDC alone. And that one is allocated for that SDDC alone. So that's how we provision our network. So in case you don't know how much workload is going to be hosted in this VMC SDDC or what all workload is going to take, how many applications, it will be very hard for you to determine what is the correct size of the network that you can allocate to the SDDC. So that will be your first step. The first step is to perform capacity planning. And once your capacity is planned, your network can be chosen. And once you've chosen the network, you can assign the management and compute gateway networks from that network. So management is basically for your management communications like your vCenter or your ESXi server, etc. Compute gateway is more for your VMs or the actual workload that will be hosted within the SDDC. Now, before network connectivity, I want to mention that this is migration to cloud. So obviously there has to be some sort of connectivity back on-prem because that's when the migration can happen, right? So there are two types of connectivity that you can establish. One is site-to-site VPN and the other is AWS Direct Connect. Now, both of them have their own pros and cons, and why we chose one over another and why you should prefer one over another. Stuff like this we'll be discussing in the forthcoming slides. So the next thing that we want to keep in mind while planning is core services. Now, core services are the critical services or the common services which are shared by all the applications that will be hosted in an SDDC. Now, one thing, few examples of core services are, you can say AD or DNS or NTP. So services like this, which any application, no matter the type of the application, will be using these services for, the baseline operations. So one thing to keep in mind while planning for core services is that applications allow very little latency when it comes to the core services. Like for example, an application server, say suppose it needs to perform a DNS query. Right, so there are a lot of DNS queries that will be performed by the application servers, and there's very little admissible latency for this kind of a transaction. Like for example, maybe it'll try for a few milliseconds to reach out the resolver for a query, but after that it'll time out and go to the backup DNS server, and if it doesn't work, the application might even break. So one thing to keep in mind very importantly during core service is that we should make sure that the core service application latency is as minimal as possible so that the application can function correctly. And then of course we're going to discuss about the resiliency in core services itself. So the last vertical we're going to be taking a look at is the strategy of migration. So there are three types of migrations that you can perform. One is cold migration, one is live migration, and the third is scheduled migration. Now, what each of these are and what advantages each of them have over the other, all of this we'll be discussing when we in the next few slides. So this is basically an overview of all the steps you need to bear in mind before planning for migration to cloud. So let's go into the network topology. So like we discussed, connectivity back to on-prem, right? So that is a very critical portion of migration to cloud. So the first approach we took was using a site-to-site VPN or using an IPsec VPN tunnel. So this approach is very good in a couple of ways. So let's discuss the pros first, right? So one of the major pros is that there's very little prerequisites required for establishing IPsec over internet, because you just have to stand up tunnel endpoints in the on-premise firewall as well as the VMware Cloud and AWS firewall. And the whole process should take you about like 1 to 2 hours maximum. That's it. And that's very, very fast when it comes to infrastructure setup. And VMware Cloud and AWS also supports IPsec VPN tunnel out of the box, so you shouldn't really have any issues over there. So the pros are all good, but the major con is that, like it's written over there, it's IPsec over internet, which means that the whole traffic will go over internet. So you don't really have any promised reliability or bandwidth that will be allocated for this particular transaction alone. No, nothing of that sort. Because it's over internet, it's mostly on a best effort basis, like how much ever is available, that much will be given to you. So though this is good for a pilot phase, or for testing out if your connectivity is going to be working all right, we would recommend a more reliable setup when you go for hosting your production workload. And that's when Direct Connect comes into the picture. Like Lalit had discussed, VMware Cloud and AWS has the advantages of both VMware and as well as AWS. So since it has the AWS backing, you can use Direct Connect, which is one of AWS features, to connect back to on-premise. So Direct Connect is a way to offer you low latency, high bandwidth, reliable connectivity back to your on-premise. So this line is allocated to you pretty much, and you'll get good speed for your transaction back to on-premise. So that's why we recommend you to consider setting up a direct connectivity in the future. So next thing that we're going to look at is the second vertical we discussed, which is core services deployment. Like I mentioned previously, core services are very critical, and they're going to be used extensively by a lot of applications irrespective of the nature of the application. We also call them as tier 0 services. So this is a small diagram on what all core services we have. It's like a illustrative purposes. So as you can see over here, we have very important services like Active Directory or OpenLDAP or DNS, NTP, etc. So basically, there are two options when it comes to deployment of core services for cloud connectivity, right? The first one is, obviously you'll have one set of these services running in your on-premise, that's for sure, because they're going to be used by every application. So either you can design it in such a way that every time an application needs to use a core service, it traverses all the way through DX and goes to on-premise and uses the core service and comes back. If not, you can deploy a set of core services within the cloud itself. So these are the two options you have. And we lean heavily towards the second option, which is deployment of core services within the cloud itself. And there are three reasons for us to take that route. The first reason is the latency. Like I mentioned previously in the previous slide, applications admissible latency for core service transaction is comparatively less. So we want to make sure that sensitive applications do not break because of the time taken for it to reach the core service and get the transaction resolution, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is cost. Anybody who's worked on public cloud would know that traffic entering the cloud might not incur a cost, but traffic exiting cloud will always incur a cost. So we wanted to reduce that cost overhead. So that's the second reason. And the third and probably most important reason is that when we set up workloads on the cloud, our main objective is to not have any dependency on the on-premise workload at all. Like for example, tomorrow, if some disaster occurs on the on-premise workload, the cloud workload should function seamlessly. It should be able to pick up where it left off, rather than, if the cloud workload also depends on some on-prem workload, there's a good chance that the cloud workload also will not be able to function fully, which is completely opposite to our intention. So these are the couple of reasons why we decided to deploy a set of core services in the cloud itself. And when it comes to security, we take it very seriously. We wanted to make sure that since these are critical services, the security standard is same as the on-premise. So we micro-segmented them using zero trust infrastructure. So we used NSX for the security concept. And what we ensured is that apart from the extremely needed traffic, everything else is blocked. So allow whatever you need to allow and block simply everything else. That is our zero trust policy in VMware. And that's how we secured our core services in the cloud as well. So the next thing we're going to jump into is a third vertical we looked at, which is the type of migration. So what we use for the migration itself is HCX or hybrid cloud extension. And HCX is a very convenient way to establish replication from on-premise to the VMware cloud on AWS. So let's run through this picture a little bit. As you can see over here, we have our on-premise data center, and then we have a VMware cloud on AWS SDDC. So like Lalit had mentioned in his slide, the VMware cloud on AWS also, the look and feel as well as the properties of that is very, very similar to that of an on-premise vCenter. So you have the same vCenter in VMware cloud on AWS, you have the same vSphere, vSAN, NSX, etc. So you have vCenter at both the ends. So essentially what you do is establish a HCX tunnel between the on-premise vCenter as well as the VMware cloud on AWS vCenter. And once you've gotten that tunnel up and running, you can migrate your applications and replicate your applications via the tunnel. So like we discussed, there are three types of migration when it comes to HCX, and you can choose any one of them depending on your application SLAs. So the first type of migration is cold migration. In this type of migration, what you do is you, during the activity migration window, you simply shut down all the application servers on the on-premise. And then you start the replication so that all the data gets replicated to the VMware cloud on AWS. Once the replication is complete, you perform the migration, and so that this will just be failed over, and the application will then be powered on in the VMware cloud on AWS end. So this is how cold migration takes place. The next option is scheduled migration. So this is a lot less disruptive than the cold migration. What you do in this is, again, during the activity window, before the activity window itself, like how many ever days are necessary depending on the data present in the application, you start the replication before the activity itself. So when you come to the activity window, almost all of the replication is done apart from the real-time traffic, which is the Delta replication. So during the activity window, you again power off the VM, but now only the Delta replication needs to be done, which takes a lot less time. So once the Delta replication is done, you again migrate it over and then flip the switch, you switch it on in VMware Cloud and AWS, and the VM application comes alive in the VMC. The third type of migration is live migration. In live migration, you pretty much extend the L2 from on-prem to VMware Cloud on AWS using HCX L2 extension appliance. Once you do that, you can perform like a live migration, something like a vMotion from on-premise to VMware Cloud on AWS with no downtime. So each of these methods have their own pros and cons. The cold migration is not so preferred because of the extensive downtime. Scheduled and live are a lot more preferred because they are usually, they do not really require your application to be down for most of the time. So this is just an illustration of whatever we discussed previously. Like you can see, there is on-premise data center, there's VMware Cloud at AWS, we have the HCX tunnel in between, and we have the app web and DB servers of the application in the on-premise end. So once the replication is completed, the application can just be migrated over to the VMware Cloud on AWS, and once it's brought back up, the application is now live in the VMware Cloud on AWS, and it's as simple as that to set up. So let's look at one of the use cases for hybrid cloud. The use case that we're going to look at right here is VMworld. Now, VMworld is one of our very popular applications. It's very critical since VMworld is a global event for us. And like we discussed previously, it's very seasonal workload. So it's preferred to host it on the cloud. So when we architected VMworld application, we wanted to make sure that the application team has complete ability to choose which data center is primary for this application. So what we wanted to do is that the application team themselves can choose whether it should be primary in the VMware Cloud on AWS or on the on-premise data center. How we did that is, of course, there is a GSLB or a global service load balancer, which will decide which will be primary and secondary. So we created a static monitoring page on the application server end, which will display one of two texts. Either it will say primary or it will say secondary. And if one portion will say like the on-premise, if it says primary, then the GSLB will detect that and make the on-premise the primary data center, and the VMware Cloud on AWS and that time will be saying secondary, so that will become the secondary site. So this is very easy to flip back and forth, and this is very useful for the application team, like for example when they do upgrades, right? So if they want to perform an upgrade and on-premise is where the application is live right now, they will first perform the upgrade in the VMware Cloud on AWS end. And once the upgrade is all complete, they will change the static page in VMware Cloud on AWS to read primary. So once that happens, the GSLB is going to detect that and it's going to switch over to the VMware Cloud on AWS. And once that happens with almost no disruption, they can go ahead and upgrade the on-premise data center side of it. So this provides a lot of flexibility in terms of a lot of activities to make sure that there is very less downtime. So now that we discussed the replication point of view, let's take a look at how we achieve disaster recovery and how we use VMware Cloud on AWS for disaster recovery. So for disaster recovery, the main thing, like Lalit was mentioning, right? The main thing is that it's very convenient to do disaster recovery in some in public cloud or VMware Cloud on AWS, mostly because you don't need your DR workload to be up and running all the time. You only need it alive during a disaster, and that too, it's going to be application by application. So you have it already. You don't really need to pay for it unless you use it. So it's very, very convenient that way. And the product that we use for that one is VMware vCenter SRM or Site Recovery Manager. So Site Recovery Manager, again, it's very convenient for you to replicate all of your data and keep a copy in the public cloud, and it'll just wait for you. It'll keep on replicating, and whenever there's a disaster, you can easily fail over using the VMware vCenter SRM. So there are a couple of prerequisites that we had to do for the disaster recovery preparation, and we're going to run through those. The first one is, like I already mentioned, you need to have a replicated copy of your application running in the cloud or VMware Cloud on AWS, right? The second thing is there needs to be separation between the cloud and the on-premise. And in VMware, we consider the cloud as untrust and the on-premise is always trust, right? So how we separate the workloads is we have a firewall in between. And so trust to untrust traffic is always allowed because it's trusted traffic. But untrust back to trust, that is implicitly denied. So basically, if you really want some rules to be allowed or some flow to be allowed, only then you go and create a rule in the firewall saying, please allow this application to talk to this application on-prem. So another important prerequisite is to find out what traffic will be needed for the application to successfully operate from the DR end as well. So that traffic list needs to be determined, and that those rules need to be created in the firewall. If these two steps are done, then the application can be failed over and tested. Once the test is done, we make sure that it's working fine, that it can be failed over anytime in case of a disaster. So we're going to look at another example, the same application from the disaster recovery point of view, which is VMworld web portal, right? So the thing to note about VMworld is that it's very, very seasonal workload. Like we mentioned, during the time that VMworld happens, there is a lot of traffic, lot of traction on this workload, but all the other times of the year, pretty much it's hardly used. And last year, for example, we had our first 100% VMworld. So we required a lot of resources to be aligned to the VMworld application at that point in time. So we wanted to make sure that we know that it's advantageous to run it in VMware Cloud on AWS. So we wanted to make sure it runs successfully in VMware Cloud on AWS. But at the same time, we also wanted to make sure that we do have the option to fail back to on-prem in case we incur any issues, just to have a backup, right? So for this failback to happen, we discussed with the application team and we came up with what SLA can be admissible, right? Depending on the RTO and the RPO, which is pretty much how much time can be admitted before the application comes back completely functional in the disaster site or the DR site, right, which is on-prem in this case. So we discussed, considering the criticality of the application, that 15 minutes is the SLA. So whenever the application, if the application had to go down or had to be failed back, maximum is 15 minutes that we can take. So depending on that, we had to automate most of the operations so that no manual intervention is incurred. So we automated the IP changes, the core service configuration, the application side configurations, even the application starting, stopping, etc. And by doing all that, we were able to achieve the 15-minute SLA if we wanted to fail back to the primary site. So now we've taken you through almost all of the technicalities, how we select the application and what are the drivers for hybrid cloud, what are the advantages of moving to a hybrid cloud. And we also took a look at how we use HCX and how we use SRM for DR. And now we would like to take you through the day two operations, how you can presume day two operations after the migration, as well as a couple of recommendations that we have for you. We faced a lot of challenges during this journey, of course, and we have a lot of learnings from it, which we would like to share with you. So the first thing is planning. Like we mentioned, we believe in having a solid plan. The first thing you need to plan for is, again, your network topology. So I stress this again, it's very essential to understand what range of IP space you need to be allocating to your SDDC before creating the SDDC. So for example, when you're planning for the SDDC, we tell you, okay, go plan for how many applications you will need, right? So suppose I think that, okay, I'm only going to need these 3 applications in the SDDC. So I can like go for a /23 for the entire SDDC, management compute included. I can go ahead and create that, right? But tomorrow, if I have the need to migrate, say 2 more applications, but all my IPs are exhausted over there. So if the IP exhaustion takes place, the only way where I can extend the IP space over there is by recreating the SDDC itself. There is no other way to, just go and edit and extend the IP space. So this is a very important decision that you need to take. You need to be very, it needs to be taken with careful and caution to make sure that you're allocating enough IP space. We recommend /20 IP space to be allocated to each of the SDDCs, just to be on the safer side, right? The next one is the application dependencies. This is one of the trickiest portions. You need to figure out exactly what application dependencies are there and allow all those rules in the firewall before you move to the DRN. How we tackle that is we use VRNI, or vRealize Network Insight. So vRealize Network Insight has out of the box support for firewall rules, right? So because it analyzes unique traffic flows and it knows the traffic patterns of all the VMs that it's learning, it can easily tell you, okay, based on the traffic flows, right? So based on whatever the VM has been communicating to, it can easily suggest the firewall rules to you. So you just have to go ahead and log into vSphere VRNI, and it will be able to give you the traffic flows that are needed. If you do not use VRNI, we would recommend to use something like VMware Log Insight and channeling all your application logs to the Log Insight server. And then you will be able to get visibility into the flows, and you can, using that, you can determine what all traffic needs to be permitted in the firewall. Third thing, of course, is core service dependencies, very critical decision. And we recommend that you deploy a set of core services in the public cloud itself. And we discussed in detail why we think you should be doing that. Second thing is about how the migration takes place. There are 3 types, like we discussed: live, scheduled, and cold. Cold is more on the disruptive side, and live and scheduled are much less disruptive. But at the end of the day, this decision can be taken based on how much SLA your application requires. But we recommend live and scheduled migration for your migration strategy. Next thing we want to discuss is operationalization, right? So one big advantage you have when it comes to operationalization in VMware Cloud and AWS is, as we discussed previously, VMware Cloud and AWS, the look and feel as well as the components are very, very similar to the on-premise vCenter. So if the administration team is already familiar with working with the on-premise vCenter, then there is hardly any learning curve for them to work with VMware Cloud and AWS, right? It's very, very easy. So that's a big, big advantage of using the VMware Cloud and AWS. No extra trainings are needed for operating in VMware Cloud and AWS, provided you already have expertise in on-premise vCenters. Still, it is very essential to find out what the roles and responsibilities are and provide training to the teams to make sure that day 2 support carries on flawlessly. And of course, monitoring is another important aspect. You need to set up monitoring for all the applications that have been moved to the cloud. The last one we want to discuss about is the production deployment itself. So to make sure that the migrations you're doing continues as a global rollout and this process takes place seamlessly, we recommend you to have a reference architecture for all the future deployments. So a reference architecture is nothing but a plan or a basic blueprint, which you can just follow time and again to just ensure you have proper migrations. Like, this can be like steps detailed as to what all you need to do as a prerequisite, or checklist of stuff that you need to check before you migrate to the cloud, or stuff like that. Whatever works for you, if you record it, so other teams can take it forward and you will be able to follow the same working process again and again to achieve a successful migration. So the last topic that we're going to discuss is the benefits of VMware Cloud on AWS, of leveraging VMware Cloud on AWS, basically. So the first point is agility. So all the operations that we were just discussing, you can also do that using CDCI or DevOps or creating infrastructure as code. Like for example, creating the VMs in the public cloud, moving VMs to the public cloud. You can create infrastructure as code for this and then just automate the whole process, which is very efficient. The second thing is scalability, especially for seasonal workloads. Scalability is a big advantage. You need to scale up or scale down whenever you want to. And also you just need to pay for whatever you use. You don't have to pay for the workload that you're not using throughout the year, only the seasonal time. Whatever you use, that time you can pay for it, and that's enough. To take you through the rest of the benefits, I would like to hand it over to Lalit.
Hey, thank you, Preeti. Thank you for your insights. So another benefit for moving or migrating your workloads to hybrid cloud is reliability. We have very good security feature with our product NSX, and we can have segment level security over there. Also, the data security and the private cloud is also one of the good thing with using this NSX. And there are so many new security tools or things are coming in our hybrid cloud, so which is going to secure the workloads very much on the cloud. The next is resiliency. As I think I have also covered it, part of driver. This is one of the very big benefit to have our DR workload running on the cloud, that is VMC, correct? And any hardware failure or anything, we have the liberty to migrate our workloads from one side to another anytime. Last but not least is our operational readiness, operation readiness. So the person who is working currently on on-prem vSphere, he can easily go ahead and manage the on-prem the VMC vSphere as well, because all the tools, everything is similar, look and feel, even all the options are going to be similar. So there is no much change. So it is very, the person who is already trained in the vSphere side, you don't need any extra sessions or trainings for any other, I mean to say the administrator, correct, to give them to come up on the hybrid cloud. So that's all the benefits for us moving towards a hybrid cloud. Over to you, Mukund.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lalit, and thanks, Preeti, for you can say taking us all through these details of the hybrid cloud and how we are utilizing this for critical applications like VMworld as well as SAP and other things.